Hello, everyone. Today we're going to look more into the Scotch game and we're going to look at the line of knight takes on c6. So the Scotch games arise after moves e4, e5. White is playing with the king's pawn. We are also replying with the same way, classical approach. Knight f3 challenging the pawn on e5. We are defending with knight c6. Then d4 immediately breaking the center, trying to keep the central pawn on e4, but after take, knight is already moving twice. And that's why we're starting to challenge it immediately with the bishop c5 move. And this is basically the starting position of the Scotch game. We're going for bishop c5, challenging the knight. And here there are a few choices definitely. And today we're going to look at knight takes on c6 most of the time. But there are also a couple of moves which we can check. First of all, the knight not only has the move knight takes c6, but also knight f5, and there is also c3 move. So we're going to look at these three options, mostly, of course, at knight takes c6, because it's the most serious move out of these three. So let's start with c3. It's unfortunately for white very slow move. White is defending the knight, but it's just not in the rhythm of the position. Also, meanwhile, we develop two pieces. White has only one piece, and we are in time to immediately develop and attack at the same time. Now, knight is attacking a pawn on e4, and the problem for white is, of course, that white's knight cannot develop so easily to c3 to defend the pawn on e4. So for that, white already has to do something special. For example, after bishop g4, pinning the knight so that knight cannot really take on e4, but after castle bishop e2, we have h6 move, immediately asking question, trying to see where the bishop goes. And after bishop h4, we can freely take a pawn, even though it feels like we weakened king a little bit, but we want a pawn, and we can also take the bishop on g3. We're going to continue also developing with moves like d6 or d5. It depends, but most likely like d6, developing our bishop. And it might feel like the king is too weakened, but the problem is that white is going to castle also short side, so it's not going to be really an issue. Knight take, knight takes c6 immediately in this position after knight f6 is possible, but it's already another story because the c6 is involved. So we're taking with a b pawn. In case of e5, immediately challenging the knight on f6, we're just playing queen e7, using the fact of the pin on the pawn, and after queen e2, we have knight d5, putting the knight on a super nice square. After g3, there is an opportunity for white to develop the bishop on g2 only. After castle bishop g2, we play a5, grabbing more space on the queen side. We're having the moves as bishop a6 available very soon. That's why castling would not even be an option, since white is going to lose material in that way. So we are clearly better here. In case of bishop d3, which would be the only move, or the only move which makes sense to defend the pawn on e4, we can immediately strike the center with d5. d5 targeting the pawn on e4, again, issues for white. Pawn takes on e4, then we play bishop g4, intermezzo move, attacking the queen. In case of bishop e2, then we are playing queen e7, pinning the bishop. We're not caring about the pawn, we're caring about king staying in the center and attacking the bishop on e2. So h3 would be followed by knight e4, super strong move, not caring about the bishop, and creating a counter threat on f2. After hg, we have knight f2, a fork. We're going for it, and after queen a4, we castle first, because if we didn't castle, there would be huge problems on c6. So we go for a castle, our rook is going to come on e8, and white is going to lose material for sure. Either it's going to be a rook or it's going to be a bishop, but some piece is going to be lost definitely. Meanwhile, queen side is just standing still for white. So f3 is another option, but after f3 is being played, dark squares are being weakened so much, and the diagonal from c5 to g1 is becoming so much compromised, as well as a king which cannot really castle. So here again, we're having the position where our bishop is under attack, but we are reacting with the following: castle. We're just castling. We're not caring about the bishop because king is in the center. And after white takes on g4, we are taking on d5, bringing the knight to the nice square on d4 on d5. The next move is going to be e8. The king is not running away. It cannot castle. We're going to bring the queen up, bring the other rook, and there's going to be again problems for white king because of the development. It's clearly better position for black in this case. So that was a c3 move, which is a bit not so good. So another move, knight f5. So the main idea of this move is not to put the knight on f5, but rather to have an idea of bringing it to e3 and from e3 to d5. So that would be nice, definitely, for white. So that's why knight goes to f5, but it's also not the best option. In this position, we have immediate strike in the center, and it's d5. We are attacking the knight, not caring even about our pawn on g7. So let's start what happens if e takes d5. Well, then we are taking the knight. There is a check on e2, knight g7 after dc. We cannot really take on c6 without compromising our pawn structure. So that's why we have to include b6 in this position, and we're going to grab the pawn on c6 after we castle with the knight, and we're going to have a great position and huge lead in the development. In case knight takes on g7, though we have attacking move king f8, targeting the knight immediately. Question is where to go with the knight. If knight goes back to f5, it's pretty much easy to reply to it because we're taking the knight, pawn takes, and after queen h4, it is going to be a huge attack against the king, white's king on e1. Rook is going to come to e8. It's very difficult to play for white this position. So queen f3, trying to defend on f2. Then we have rook e8, king d1, and now we're going for development, knight f6. We have all pieces developed well. This rook is left to place on g8, targeting the g2 square potentially. This pawn is falling on f2, and well, the king is still in the center. Big attack is incoming. It's already practically winning position for black. In case of knight coming to h5, then we can introduce the queen h4 as well, because we're developing with a tempo, attacking on f2 and e4. And well, the thing is now that the problem for, huge problem for white is a pawn on f2. And the only way to defend it is to bring knight back to g3. And if we count, you can see all the arrows. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. So knight went this journey to arrive to g3, which was okay. I would rather make it red arrows. So the knight went all this journey to come to g3 square, and it's only for a cost of 1 pawn, which we can also take anytime soon. So that's, of course, a lot of time was spent for knight from g3 to come to become a knight on g3. So we go with knight f6. We are continuing our development with a piece with a knight. The only not the only piece. We still have bishop there, but practically the only piece which can introduce in the attack on the pawn on f2. In case e takes d5. White is trying to be greedy. We have knight g4 immediately targeting the pawn on f2. And after dc, bishop f2 check, king has to move. Now king cannot castle any longer. And now after knight h2, the knight is hanging on g3. The position is lost for white. So in case bishop goes to e2, white would love to castle. We're going to go with a bishop e6, defending the pawn on d5, at the same time preparing rook entering the position. And basically, we're introducing another piece in the position, and we practically finish the development. So after e d5, of course, we have to take. Now we cannot sacrifice any more pawns. Bishop takes and also targeting the pawn on g2 at the same time. Castle looks like defending the pawn on g2, but after h5, we introduce so many threats in the position. First of all, knight can come to g4 with the idea of a checkmate. Let's say white is doing some move. I don't know. Let's put like knight c3. Then we have knight g4, and the problem is a checkmate threat is there. So what can white do about it? Okay, white can try to take the knight, but after we take it, then we again have a checkmate threat. So it's not really working. And if white is playing something like h3, trying to stop it, well, we use the fact that there is a king pinned, sorry, the pawn is pinned to the king. So we have queen g3 where we are winning a piece since the pawn cannot grab the queen any longer. So that's why, but there are also other moves in this position. White has to do something about this. So there are huge threat is coming. Bishop e3, trying to stop the pin. We're taking on e3 fe, and now rook d8, bringing the rook to d8 with some threats of taking or jumping away with the bishop. In case of queen e1, we go with knight to g4, and already big problems are there. It's very difficult to see how to react with white not to lose, but it looks like the position is losing, so very, very tough position for white. In case queen d3 has been played, it's actually very, very strong move in this position, or maybe the only move. We can jump with knight g4, and now h3 is possible since the knight is defended by the queen. Now we go forward with rook to d8. We bring the rook, x-raying the queen on d3. Now knight d2. White is trying to finish the development and bring the other piece to defend. Rook d3. Now rook is free to go wherever it wants on the 6th rank to introduce it into the attack against the king. And now in case of queen c3, which would attack the rook on h8, we're going to play bishop d4, challenging the queen. Knight goes to f5, attacking both the queen and the bishop. We cannot really take on c3. We have to go with the queen back. Knight takes, and now we take with a knight and creating another threat of taking on e4. Bishop goes back to d1, now knight e5. Another strong move. Now we have many ideas. Now g2 is getting weaker and weaker. We have ideas like bringing the rook to g8, putting a pressure on g2. And at some moment we have some jumps like knight f3 in the position. So in case of f3 here, we have rook g8, rook f2, and now bishop c6, putting the bishop back so that knight is defended by the rook. So earlier, knight was defended by tactical reasons. So it was not really possible to take back then. There were some jumps with a knight to f3, if I'm not mistaken. But now it's not possible because rook is defending the pawn on e2. So after all these lines taking, then it's not really working because at the end of the line, the pawn is protected on g2. So bishop c6 going back and having great position. We have great pieces, monstrous knights, and on the verge of losing white's position. So bishop g4 is another possibility. We take with the hg pawn, now threatening to take on h3 as well. At the same time, we open the h file, which is very nice. Knight f5 is a fork on the queen and the rook. Here we play queen h5, removing the queen, knight g3 going back. Now white wants to repeat to make a draw because attack is really annoying. But here black has a very nice move, super strong, brilliant move, g takes h3, giving up the whole queen. The problem for white is that the attack is so strong that the queen is not needed. We're just sacrificing a queen for one piece. And looking at the pawns, yeah, pawns are the same. So we sacrificed, literally, we sacrificed a queen for a bishop in this position, or it was a knight, but now we have a bishop for a queen. So yeah, so it's absolutely incredible. And the biggest problem here is that white cannot really move because there are so many pins. So let's say if g3 happens, this is going to be a checkmate. Next move threat could be take on g2 and checkmate on h1. So it's just absolutely incredible how tough position of white is. Also, this pawn cannot move due to this pin. So yeah, super, super tough position for white. So that was basically all we looked at this knight f5 line. So it's not a good move, but it's possible. That's why we looked for it. And knight to 6 is a main move. But again, if we count the moves, 1, 2, 3 moves were needed to take the knight on c6, while we developed the move with just one move. So that's why we kind of can say that we won some time with this operation. But of course, there are some disadvantages. So in this position, our move, which we're going for, let's start with the main move. Main move is queen f6, intermediate move, targeting f2 at the same time and knight on c6. There is nothing bad about this move. It's just we're going for a different line. We're going for b takes c6 in this position. And it could be already a surprise for an opponent because he would most likely expect queen coming to f6. The idea of b takes c6 is that this position is getting we try to get more complicated positions. We want to keep the queens on the board. We don't want to trade so early into the endgame. And if we want to trade in the endgame, we're going to do it later. So b takes c6 is already a very interesting move, and introducing the idea of queen h4 due to the lack of the knight on f3. So now there are already many moves for whites. Let's start with normal developing move, knight c3. So knight c3 looks fine. Now we have we play knight f6, and this position is going to transpose to the 4 knights, Scotch game 4 knights, because now we have these 2 pieces introduced. So we transpose in that chapter. Queen g4 looks like an interesting move because it's targeting the pawn on g7, and here I would like you to stop the video and try to find the move for black, the best one. So I hope you found the move. It is, of course, not caring about development and playing knight f6, because after queen g7, rook g8, queen h6, we have even bishop takes f2, since after king takes, there is a very beautiful fork, knight g4. So that's why on queen g4, we are not reacting and playing knight f6. That's why it's not a good move. So bishop c4, trying to develop the bishop normally. So the main move is going to be bishop to d3, which may feel like a bit more passive, because the bishop on b3 is standing like a big pawn, depending the pawn on e4. So that's why white is trying to be more active. So there are many advantages of the move. First of all, it's a very good square for the bishop normally. Bishop is usually put there in many openings, and it's targeting f7 squared many times. So also it's controlling the d5 square in case we want to go for d5. It's going to be more difficult because of this bishop, or easier sometimes. We're going to see what I'm talking about, because sometimes we can just sacrifice d5. You know, we don't always have to play d5 when it works out without sacrifice. Anyways, bishop c4 is an interesting move. Let's dive into the line, and we definitely start with a queen h4. There is no knight on f3, so we can do it. We can do it immediately attacking f2 and e4 pawn. So now the question, how do you defend all of it? Of course, you don't have to defend both pawns. It's just enough to defend one. And that's why castle is actually the main move here. But let's look at some moves which are defending both pawns. For example, queen f3, defending f2, defending e4, and attacking on f7. Well, of course, here, actually, I would like to stop. I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. So yeah, once we were talking about this idea before, definitely knight f6 could be a good option, but we have to be careful about any e5 ideas, and then f7 might really hang. So in this position, we have strong move d5, immediately attacking the bishop. And the problem is that the bishop is hanging on c4, so the pawn cannot really capture on d5. Weak tempo on the bishop, and now bishop goes away. Now bishop goes to the position where it usually was. And after knight f6, we are attacking the pawn on e4. So if knight d2 trying to defend the pawn, we have knight g4, putting even more pressure on f2. We don't have to worry about f7 since the bishop is already gone. So after g3, queen h3, and white even cannot really castle. White has big issues. We're going to castle in the next move. We have our bishop in the position. We are going to have rook on e8. We will see where the bishop will be, but it can also be on d7 and so on. So we have huge position. So what happens in case e takes d5? Well, then we take Then we don't really take because we have knight g4 again attacking f2, and after g3 we have queen e7 with a check targeting the queen. Bishop e3 feels kind of natural to stop the check. Then we take the bishop, pawn takes. We could have won a pawn back immediately here, but again, we're always trying to get better development, better piece activity over the material advantage. That's why we're going for knight e5. After queen goes away, then we play rook b8, targeting the the b2 pawn. The position is pretty much crushing because king is still in the center. There are many weaknesses for white. We are ready to finish the development with castling the king. Bishop is going to get out from c8. So continuation could be following, let's say b3. Then we have bishop h3 trick, very nice trick, because after queen takes h3, there is knight d3 with check, cd3, queen e3, king d1, and queen f3. We're going to capture the rook on h1. So that was queen f3 option, defending if queen e2, at the same time defending all three options, so e4, f2, and bishop on c4 looks logical. But now we're going for knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4. So here, in case of castle, we have castle, of course, knight c3, and here we have again d5 option, even though it's like tactically, if we look at it, it's losing a pawn, but it's still okay. Because if takes, we have rook e8, we're not even taking the pawn, we're immediately introducing a new piece in the position. Queen d3, bishop d6, bishop goes back, targeting h2. And after h3, we have knight g4. You cannot take the knight because it will be a checkmate on h2. And other than that, there are threats of bishop h2 and take on f2 in this position, which are possible. So in case of bishop d3, then we have rook e8, bringing the rook to this file and pinning the pawn. Knight c3 looks logical. Since we developed the knight on f6, targeting the pawn, knight is developing on c3, defending the pawn. Now we go castle. And in case of g3, we have queen h3, stopping the castle for white. And after bishop e3, we have bishop b4, pinning the knight. So very nice position, clear advantage for black. In case of the castle, we go for d5 again. We're again trying to attack. We're not afraid to give up a pawn. So after ed, rook e8, we have another attack on the queen. We have an intermezzo move, queen d3, and now bishop d6, bringing all the pieces to an attack on the king side. So here after g3, which would weaken the position of white's king a lot, we have queen h3, and queen f3, which is trying maybe to put queen on g2 at some moment. We have bishop g4, queen g2. We are not trading the queens because the queen is very weak on g2. And after queen h5, in case of h4, we have bishop f3. So of course, the idea would be to play bishop f3 or bishop h3. And if h4 is played, we have bishop f3, very nice move. After queen h3, cd5 happens. And basically, in this position already, we captured back the pawn. We didn't lose any material. But the position of white is so bad because the pieces are all... they cannot really move. They are very awkward on the king side, as well as, okay, some of the pieces are on the queen side, but definitely they're not defending. Like, you would love to have this bishop on g2, but this bishop is on completely opposite side of the board. So yeah, great ideas definitely for black in that position. h3, another idea, stopping the idea of the checkmate, but it's introducing the knight g4. With, again, we have an idea of bishop h2 and knight f2 in the picture. So of course, taking on g4 is not possible because it's checkmate. Bishop b3, bishop goes away. On b3, after bishop h2, king goes to h1, knight f2, rook f2, queen f2, king f2, and now we have rook e1, the knockout move, which is blocking all the activity of the pieces. So now bishop cannot really get out, and we are threatening some very nasty checks and some checkmates. We can also play h5, h4, and checkmate on g1. But yeah, definitely very tough position for white and losing. So after that, h3 could be played immediately. So the main idea of this move is that white wants to go for g3, attacking the queen, but without an opportunity of black's queen coming to h3. So they have to do it before castle. Well, it makes a lot of sense, but we're not going to just sit still. We have rook e8 move, which is immediately x-raying all pieces on the e file. So now g3, targeting the queen, makes a lot of sense. We play queen h5, the only move. We don't have any other move. Queen h5. Queen trade is happening, knight h5. And now we're getting into the end game. We're getting into the end game. We didn't sacrifice a pawn yet, but we have d5 move all the time in the picture. We can bring back the knight to f6 to target the pawn on e4. The position is not much, but maybe slightly better for black due to the fact that there is a weakness on e4, which we can challenge. And we have a bishop pair, which is going to work pretty nicely here after we push the d5 or d6. It depends on what we're going to do here. Okay, talking about the pawn structure, even though we have double pawns, our pawn structure is better due to the fact of these pawns on the king side, which can become weaknesses because they're pretty awkward there. So this was knight c3 move. So now we're going for the e5 option. And in this case, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. Yeah, so exactly. So e5 is basically the move with which white is trying to test black. But as we already were talking a lot about it, we're not getting scared by such moves because we are ready to sacrifice a piece by castling, because we're not afraid to sacrifice a piece for the lead in the development. So after e takes f6, we're having very important move d5. We always want to play this move d5, opening up our bishop. d5. In case of bishop d3, then we have bishop g4, and basically the next move rook e8, and white is going to lose a lot of material. In case of f takes g7, this is allowing extra opportunity for black, playing rook d8, castle, and now bishop g4. And the point is that basically the white is forced to take the rook on d8. Now they're going to take the tempo on the queen, and after queen d3 takes queen g3, queen g3, hg, rook a b8, bring in the rook. We're getting to the end game where, okay, looking at our pawn structure is not so appealing, but looking at the piece activity, we're seeing that we definitely have an advantage in the activity of the pieces. Also, we don't allow white to develop so easily because bishop has to defend the pawn on b2. So it's pretty tough for white, but yeah, definitely very interesting end game, slightly better for black, but very unbalanced. So castle happened for white. Now we're going for bishop d6, immediately targeting h2 pawn. Basically, now white is forced to play some move with a pawn in order to weaken the king side. So now g3 could be a move targeting the queen. We're going for queen c4, taking the bishop immediately. So queen c4 takes. Again, we're having similar pawn structure like in the previous line. We have the triple pawn, and we have an isolated pawn here. So yeah, position is of course pretty imbalanced due to the fact that we have a bishop pair, and since there is no center, the bishop pair should be very strong in this kind of positions. But of course, it definitely compensates the pawn structure which we have. The result can be anything in this position, depends how well you use the power of the bishop pair and how good you defend your weaknesses. So castle, white is going for castle, not going for queen f3, not defending the pawn. Of course, the main idea is a tactical defense of the pawn on e4, because in case we take on e4, definitely there is going to be rook e1, so we don't really want that. So we have to go for knight f6, targeting the pawn. Now we're ready to take on e4, but with the knight. So now, of course, pawn has to be defended in some way. So let's start with a knight d2 move. So knight d2 is actually the best move, but it happened only in one game. and but definitely is the best approach for white. So what white is doing, white is defending the pawn on e4 with this move, and also knight is ready to jump at some moment to f3 square, which is very interesting since white is lacking the knight on c3. So that's why it looks like a move which makes a lot of sense. If we're going for knight g4, it's not so clear anymore, because after knight f3, if we play knight f2, queen e2, knight g4, king goes away, queen f5, queen h5, e5. The position is a bit strange and complicated because there is a compensation for the pawn for sure due to the strong e5 pawn. Our bishop cannot really get out yet. So yeah, pretty strange position, to be honest. And if bishop takes on f2, king h1, queen h5, bishop f5, we're just bringing the rook, the bishop, the queen to c5, queen d3, queen h5, and basically like this we can make a draw. But okay, it's of course with engine moves, and white can definitely do some mistakes in this line. So so that's why it's the best not to go for this knight g4 immediately, but just to castle in this position. Knight f3, obviously no one played this move. Okay, first of all, it's like hanging the e4 pawn. This is all kind of the engine moves, so it's very complex, and I don't think that we will see the game here unless white is preparing this. So yeah, we're going to see some other engine moves. So queen, we take on the pawn on e4, bishop d3, queen d5, now bishop g5, knight e4, c4, queen e6, bishop f4, targeting also the pawn on c7 at some moment, d5, rook c1, and now queen e7. So basically, white played all the best moves. There is definitely a compensation for a pawn from white. But again, the moves were very uneasy. Like all the moves which white played were very difficult to explain for the human being. So that's why I would say it's very unlikely, this position very unlikely to happen. So at some moment, white should make some mistake. And there should be definitely some good play for the pawn. So it was a castle here, and knight d2 move. Aha, yes. So we looked at knight d2 basically. So now we go with the queen f3. Queen f3 is generally very bad because of the d5 move again. Knight is hanging on the fourth rank. So sorry. Okay, knight f6. Yeah, we were looking at queen f3, which was not good. So now we go for knight c3, which is also not good. Again, like this knight d2 is actually the best move, but again, it's engine move. So knight c3 makes like the most sense logically, like developing the knight, defending the pawn. Knight on c3 is very difficult square, but now the problem is that knight cannot come to c3 to defend the king side. So now knight g4 immediately targeting h2 and f2 pawns. So in case of h3, then we can immediately take on f4 and position is lost for white. If bishop f4 coming and defending the pawn on h2, then we have idea. First of all, bishop f2 can be already interesting, but knight f2 is also working, because after knight f2, bishop is f7, very interesting line. So here the problem is, after king takes f7, bishop g3 is a nice intermezzo, and we cannot really take on d1 with a check because our knight is pinned. So that's why super important move, king d8 in this position. King d8 has to be played, and after queen h5, we trade and we jump away with a knight. King h1, knight f4, rook f4, and rook b8. And we received an endgame where we have a bishop pair. Pawn structure is around the same since we have double pawns, but I would say the double pawns are not as weak as a pawn on e4. And also there are some weaknesses which we can create later in the game. So definitely a clearly better position for black. G3 is another move, the most common way to respond from white, but it's pretty bad because here we have queen h3 immediately. Entering the queen there, and well, the position of the king is awkward. You would love to put the bishop on g2, but it's not possible any longer. So queen f3, trying to introduce the queen on g2 in case something like knight g4. So we castle. If bishop g5, we have d5 immediately, another strike of d5. This is always happening with the idea, of course, bringing the bishop all the way to g4, creating many threats. So now ed, we're not waiting any second. We're playing bishop g4, queen g2, and now cd, attacking the bishop. So now queen cannot trade because the rook is going to hang and the bishop at the same move. So bishop has to play bishop f6. We take on c4. The bishop is hanging on f6. White has to do something. Bishop c3, and now we go queen h5, removing the queen, introducing ideas of bishop f3 and bishop h3 in the picture. Position is crushing for black. Black is just crushing white in this position. Knight c3 in this position. I say position too much. Knight c3 here is also kind of a move which defends from d4 and somehow stops d5, but it's actually not really stopping d5 because we can just go for it. We're just sacrificing the pawn again. Pawn takes, bishop g4 at the same time, queen g4. We have queen h5, and we're introducing the threats of of bishop f3 and bishop h3. So let's see what is possible from here. Let's say white is going for rook e1 slowly. We're playing bishop h3, bishop e2, enter mezzo move. Now rook e1, we're pinning the rook, so bishop cannot really take the queen. Now bishop e3, we take with the rook, very nice move, because after bishop takes our queen, we take on e1, rook takes, we take the queen on the g2, and after king takes, at the end of the line, we're appearing to have an extra piece. h4 is a very logical move, but then we have bishop f3, and after queen h3, cd, bishop d3, we have knight e4. The position is crushing again. We're just crushing white on the light squares, and pieces are perfect. So that was all about the bishop c4 line. So now we're going to go into the main line, bishop d3. This is the most correct approach from white. Bishop is on d3, defending the pawn on e4, and white is ready to castle in the next move. So now we are going for queen h4, immediately targeting the f2, potentially also the h2 square and e4 at the same time, like in the previous line. The difference here is that this d4 is not going to be the tempo any longer, even though it feels like the bishop is a bit more passive on d3 square. And let's not forget again, there is no knight on f3, so that's why we can go for this option. So castle immediately. Now we go for development, knight f6, getting ready to castle. In case of knight d2, which is not a good move, we're having knight g4 immediately, and after knight f3, there is knight f2, super strong move, and white can try to take on h4, but then we are going to take on d1 with a check. So queen e2 is another move, but then after castle, in case of knight c3, we have d5 immediately. Now we are breaking the d5 again. It's one of the key ideas in the position, breaking the d5 and bringing the bishop to g4. So e takes d5, rook e8, queen f3, bishop d6, bishop going back, targeting the h2 pawn, and also not allowing any queen g3 to trade the queens. So now a3 has to be played, but we have bishop g4, pawn cannot take the bishop because there is a checkmate on g2 on h2. So after g3, we take on h3, queen goes to g2, and we have the same idea of queen g5, but now it's even stronger because the h file is completely opened, and well, the position is again lost for white. So g3 is another approach. We can go bishop g4, allowing trade of the queens, but at the end of the story, we are getting much better position. We are not getting a bishop pair here, but of course, first of all, white can try to take a pawn and be a pawn up in this endgame, but the pawn structure is much worse for white, and our pieces are much more active, so that's why the position is clearly better for black. In case of knight d2, which makes more sense, knight aims for f3 perfect square for the knight. Here we go rook e8, immediately creating a pin on this pawn. Knight f3, queen goes back to h5, h3, d6, and now bishop e3, bishop d7 we are going for. And position is around equal. Of course, it's far from draw, but it's around equal position where we are pushing for the e4 pawn, and we should be careful about trading the pieces, and we shouldn't definitely trap our queen on h5. We have to be careful about it. So h3 immediately, instead of queen e2, which we'll look at. So basically, white is stopping the knight g4 idea at this position. So but the thing is that now on h3 we have a target with the bishop which we can sacrifice at some moment. So that's why we want to play d5. And in this position, we want to play d5, but d5 could lead to some quick draw in this position. So if we play d5, e5, knight h5, knight e2, we sacrifice, we play knight f4, taking on f3, and then we're getting this draw. But if we play d6, we're keeping our our ambitions here. So now the problem is after queen f3, I mean, this is kind of the best move. We try to defend everything. We have knight d7, bishop e3. We're remaneuvering the knight, targeting the queen. We can take the bishop in the next move if we want to. Bishop e3, queen e3, and now g5. Our idea is to bring the rook to g8, push for g4, and there are many ideas also. Queen f4 could be an idea, trading the queens and putting a pressure on the king and all the pawns on the king side. Due to this h3, there is this weakness on the king side, which we can try to exploit. So knight e2 would be immediately losing move, because after take on h3, gh, queen g3, we take all the pawns, and after knight g4, white is just simply cannot hold the position together. After knight f3, we just have queen g3 and bishop f takes on f2. We're threatening already the checkmate in 2 moves, so it's going to be not easy. I mean, white will have to sacrifice something, but I actually don't know even how white can survive here. So it's made unstoppable for white. Sorry. So that was an h3 move, which also was interesting but kind of dubious. And queen f3 is the best in this variation. So first of all, white is defending the pawn on f2, also wants to bring the bishop to f4. So this is kind of the idea, bringing the bishop to f4 and then protecting all on the dark squares. So that's why in this position, very important and very interesting option is to play, okay, the move which we're going to play is a very interesting option, because if we're playing something like castle short, we have to be ready for the e5 push. But in this position, we are playing bishop d4. Very nice and interesting move. So first of all, we know that bishop f4 is an idea and e5 could be an idea. So it's very easy for us to try to anticipate it. And bishop d4 is a bit unusual move, but once we know it, then we understand. First of all, we are stopping the e5 ideas, and second of all, we stop the ideas of bishop being developed, since bishop has to cover the pawn on b2. So super strong move, very nice, very nice. So knight d2, white is trying to develop. We have knight g4. Case of queen g3, we are ready to trade the pieces and play d3, knight f3, and bishop b6. So we are ready to put our knight to e5. We have around equal position. Again, anything can happen here. But yeah, definitely white has some chances, black has some chances. So around equal position with no problems for black. h3, targeting the knight immediately. Then we are playing knight e5. Attacking was queen and the bishop. Queen goes back to e2, castle, knight f3. We are trading the knights, rook e8, and after c3, bishop e5. Again, we're attacking the king on the king side, but of course the position is around equal here. White is defending well, but no issues for black, and black can continue an attack. Black can play in the future for d6, for d5, for bringing the rook on the 6th rank, trying to create some strengths against the king on the king side. So that was a knight e2 option. Case of h3, which would stop the ideas of knight g4 as well, because it was a big threat. We're going for castle. Now there is no e5 and no bishop e4, bishop f4. So now knight c3 makes sense, and now bishop f4 is already kind of introduced in the position. Now we go rook e8. We're bringing the rook. We're putting more pressure on the e4 pawn. And here, after knight e2, which would try to kick the bishop from the d4, the very nice move we have to remember is going with the bishop back, but to e5. Again, we're keeping an eye on b2 square, but at the same time, we're also having the bishop controlling this very nice h to b8 diagonal. So in the next move, we're ready to go with a d6 or d5, and our bishop is ready to go on a6 at some moment. We can play a5, bishop a6, and so on and so forth. So it was h3 move. So c3 is another move. So after, in case of c3 here, we have to remember a very important move. Here, going back to e5 would be a mistake, because after e5, bishop e5, g3, queen h3, knight d2. And now knight c4 is coming in the next move. We don't really have good square for the bishop. So here we have to know an intermediate move, knight g4, threatening a checkmate on h2. It's a super important move because we need to ask white some questions. So in case of h3, we play knight a5, another intermediate move, targeting the queen and the bishop at the same time. Queen e2, bishop goes back to b6, and after bishop e3, we have g5. Super strong. Attack is ongoing. We're threatening to play rook g8, g4, and so on, and we're just on the roll against the white's king. So knight d2, we're going for g4, hg, and now rook g8. Now position is slightly better for black, but I would say it's a very strong attack, so white has to be really careful here. In case of bishop f4, which also makes a lot of sense, stopping the checkmate on h2, we have knight e5, and we're forcing many trades. So now we're creating this fork, so now white has to do something. In case of bishop e5, it is not going to cause many problems for black because we take. Again, the checkmate threat is there, so g3 has to be played. Queen e7 goes all the way back. We cannot really put more pressure, so there is no sense in queen h3 any longer. So knight d2, and we play g6. Our bishop can return to g7. We're going to have fianchetto bishop. We have a bishop pair advantage in the position. So objectively speaking, it's around equal position. I think after we finish the development and bring out the rooks, our bishop can be very dangerous pieces on the board. So there we can try to gain an advantage. If queen goes back to e2, then we can take on d3. So if bishop goes away on g3 with the intermezzo move, we play queen f6, queen e3, and then bishop goes back to b6. Again, keeping an eye on this king. So knight e2. Now we have queen g6. We are putting the queen on this diagonal and extraying the queen on d3. Knight c4 coming forward, castle. If knight takes, then we're taking with the a pawn, kind of putting all the pawns together. Bishop takes c7. Now we have bishop a6, an intermediate move. And after c4, we have d5. And it's breaking white from all the sides. From all the sides, there are pins. Not possible to take the pawn on d5. Super nice move. So queen, in case queen takes on this reason, we have bishop b6 immediately. Bishop go back to e3. Looks very logical. Now we castle, knight d2 and d6. We're waiting for white to take on b6 to help us to fix our pawn structure. Other than that, of course, we have a bishop pair for a time being till the bishop is taken on b6. We can go for king h8, prophylactical move, removing it from this diagonal. And we are ready to push for the f5 in this position, definitely. And yeah, prepare bringing the pieces, bishop d7, rook a to d8, rook a to e8, sorry, and yeah, continue the play. So in case of queen f3, instead of the castle, so we looked at castle. So now queen f3 is another move. Immediately going for the idea of bishop f4 or e5. So without the castle, but of course it's different story when the e5 happens without castle. So we can actually go for knight f6. So here the point is that white doesn't really have this anymore, so white has to castle kind of. But if white is castling, then we have play bishop d4 and we transport to the line we just discussed. What happens if white is offering a trade? Then queen g3 we trade. White managing to open the h file to attack the pawn on h7 at some moment, but there is not much which is going to happen. But of course, maybe it's an achievement. So knight g4, we are targeting the pawn on f2, f3, and now after knight f2, we are managing to get the bishop pair, because now we're going to play bishop d4. And yeah, we have a bishop pair advantage. We have some weak pawn, but also white has, and also some double pawns, so it's not a big deal. Definitely position is not so open for the bishop pair, but maybe in the future we can trade more pawns going for f5, d5, and we could definitely open up the bishops, and maybe we could make bishops even more active and get some advantage. Bishop f4 is a move which we didn't manage to stop, but okay, what to do? We cannot play so many moves at one move. So white is attacking the pawn on c7, threatening also to go for e5. So we have to do something, and we go for it. We play d5 immediately. We don't waste time. We put the pressure on e5 and ask question from white. So if e5 is played, it's a little bit too much here because we already have pawn on d5. So now we have knight h5 targeting the bishop. Bishop goes to g3. We have queen b4 check and attack on b3 at the same time. If knight d2, we have bishop g4 attacking the queen and defending the knight on c6. So we are winning a lot of material because there is not many squares where queen can go. Sorry, not many squares, but it's not even impossible to find a square. In case of g3 intermezzo, which would attack our queen, we have another intermezzo, bishop g4 attacking the queen of white. So now if queen goes to g2, we have knight f4, pawn takes, and we go for rook b8. We are putting pressure on the pawn. White has some weaknesses on the king side. We potentially have some also weaknesses. We have a bishop pair advantage. Well, the position looks actually pretty so bad for white that it's completely losing objectively for computer due to all the weaknesses and our perfectly placed pieces. So what happens in case of knight c3? Well, then we have again knight h5 idea, bishop g3, we take the bishop, queen takes, we trade the pieces. Again, rook is being opened up, but not really for much. And now we play bishop e6. We are having, again, the bishop pair advantage, some weaknesses on the c file, but of course we're aiming to attack white's pawns. And as well, okay, later we can play also h6 to defend the pawn on h7 in case it brings us some problems. But other than that, position without any problems, around equal for both sides. So if pawn takes on d5, then we're capturing the pawn with a d5 on d5 and immediately attacking the bishop on f4. So queen goes to e2, queen e7, trading the queens, and now we take with the bishop to bring the bishop to f6. In case white is playing bishop g3, we are completely fine because we are bringing the bishop to this long diagonal and we are already even clearly better in this position. But after bishop e5, then we are forced to play f6. So here, after bishop g3, then we play rook b8. If knight c3, we are taking the pawn. Trade happens on d5, bishop c7, and king f7. Position is around equal. Both sides have bishop pairs and two rooks. So, and in case of b3 here, then we play knight b4. We're threatening to take a bishop or to check on c2. So if bishop goes to d4, then we have c5, bishop c3, and rook b8, again with the idea of either taking the knight on c3 or taking the other knight on d3 and getting a bishop pair advantage as a compensation for our pawn structure. But generally speaking, in this kind of positions, we have a big piece activity. So even if we have problems with our pawn structure, we're compensating for it with our active pieces. So we were looking at ed. So now knight d2, trying to keep everything solid and not taking the pawn. So knight d2. Now we're going for knight h5, again with the same idea, attacking the bishop. So now white can go for bishop g3, similar move. We take on g3, queen takes. Again, queen trade is happening, a5. And black is doing pretty well because of the pair of bishops, and d5 has already happened. So now we're going to look at bishop c7. White is trying to win the pawn, but then bishop g4 attacking the queen. And, well, it's actually very difficult to find the square for a queen, so the only move is bishop g3. But then we move the queen back. And the problem is that after h4, queen g6, there are no real squares for the queen any longer, and no attacks on the queen, on the white's, on the black's king. So white is losing a lot of material. g3 is another option targeting our queen on h4. Then we are going for bishop g4, and we are attacking the queen again. If white is taking on h4, we're going to take on f3 and take the bishop, so it's not really possible. Queen g2 has to be played. So after queen g2, white is keeping the queens on the board. Knight f4 takes, and we castle. Rook g1, and after g6, again, there is a problem with the pawn structure. The bishop on g2 is actually defended due to the weakness on f2. So white cannot really take our bishop, and meanwhile we defend it with g6, and we have great positions, great minor pieces, and big attack. So if pawn takes on g4, then the problem is that after bishop takes, knight takes, we're taking on f4. The pawn structure is a bit compromised for white, for black as well a little bit, but generally speaking, our pieces are more active in this position, so that's why the position is also slightly better for black. So we looked probably at the most of the moves. We looked at the queen f3, and now we're moving to the main move. The main line is bringing the queen to e2. This is the main line. Basically, what's the idea is that white is preparing to go for the bishop e3 move to exchange our strong bishop on c5, and also later with ideas of like playing like h3, stopping our knight coming to g4. So knight f6 coming forward. Now, in case of the castle, we would transpose to the line which we already discussed, which is castle move on the move 7. So we already talked about this. So now h3 kind of makes sense, but it's pretty tricky move. So idea is to play g3 like in the previous line, so that queen doesn't have a chance to go on h3. So next move is g3 possible. And after queen h5 to trade the queens. And in this position, there is an extra opportunity for white to push for g4. So let's make some move. Let's castle. So if we castle, g3, queen h5, then there is g5, queen goes back, and then there is g5. So, and basically with this, in this way, white's whole idea is not really to castle king side anymore, because white already weakened a lot, but white won a lot of tempis move by move, attacking the queen on g3, then on g4, then on g5. So very interesting idea. So that's why we have to react on it. We have to react on this idea, and we go for d5 immediately. We strike in the center, and we stop pawn reaching g4. So now in case of e5, then we have knight e4, bishop e4, queen e4 trading, and we're getting in the round equal endgame. So if pawn takes on d5, very interesting, because we allow this d5 with the check. It's very special moment where we allow that this actually with a check, and we play king d8, introducing the rook e8, huge threat into the position, and now rook e8 would pin the queen and win it. So now white has to do something. In case of g3 targeting the queen, we have queen d4 move, removing the queen, and if bishop e3 is played, it's already a huge mistake, because after queen b2, bishop c5, rook e8, bishop goes here, we're just taking a lot of material. Oh, sorry, accidentally. So now we're going to look at knight c3. What happens if queen d4 and knight c3? Well, then we have rook e3 without any problems, bishop e3, queen b4, attacking on b2. If castle, then there is bishop h3, pawn is hanging on h3. Queen d2, then we take on d4 on d5 with the idea of d4. Long castle, rook takes, super nice positional sacrifice. Rook takes on e3, and now we play rook b8. If knight b5, we have rook b5, bishop b5, and queen b5, and we are getting 3 minor pieces which are very active once and attack against the king. 3 minor pieces, sorry, I forgot to say, for 2 rooks, which is kind of, and it's not much better, but it's definitely good advantage and huge attack in that particular case. So b3 could be also played, but then we have queen a5, and we have definitely a compensation for the pawn in this position. Oh, sorry, for an exchange. I already messed up what we sacrifice in exchange. So we have compensation for an exchange in this position. We have attack against the king. There are so many weaknesses on the dark squares, and yeah, super nice position for black. So now queen f3, another option, just removing the queen from the file. Rook e8 check, king goes away, and knight d7, very strong move. The idea of knight is remaneuver it on e5 and creating some forks on the queen, on the bishop. So very nice idea. So if knight c3 developing normally, then we have knight e5, queen f4, taking on d3. We can do it. Rook b8, take, queen f4, we trade the pieces, and after rook e6, we're getting into very nice endgame, where currently we're down 2 pawns actually, but the c6 pawn is going to be gone in a couple of moments. We have a bishop pair advantage, and most all the pawns of white are actually isolated. So yeah, great position and great endgame to fight for the win. So if c3 is being played immediately, then we take on d5, queen d5, pawn takes. We actually undoubled our pawns. King g2, knight e5, going forward, targeting the bishop on d3. And after bishop e2, we have bishop b7 with already some threats, opening up the bishop on this long diagonal. Position is definitely not clearly better, but slightly better for black, since there is no more problem with the pawn structure, but our pieces are much more active than white's. So now c4, we're looking at the main move. It was actually played in the game of Lucas van Forest against Moroni in 2018. So c4 was played, and here rook e8, in case rook e8 would be played, that would be bishop e3, queen e5, bishop takes, we take on b2, very interesting intermezzo, and bishop e3, queen e1, dc, rook e8, rook e7, sorry, g4, king e8, castle, and queen e5. So this is what happened in the game. The rook e8 move was happening. The position, of course, like materially speaking, we have an extra exchange, but its position is a bit messy. So that's why there is an improvement over the game to play bishop before first. So king f1, king goes away, white has to move the kings. Now we play rook e3, now bishop e3, now rook e3, fe, and queen e5. And now we sacrificed an exchange, but in return for that, we're having some very strong ideas of coming with a knight to h5, attacking the g3 squared. e3 could be weak, also b2, and we have a bishop pair advantage in this position. So definitely some great position and fantastic compensation with so many active pieces. So that was it. And now we're going to look at the castle. That was a g3. Yeah, now we're looking at the castle, what happens. So white is going away with the king, so not allowing any rook e8 ideas. But now we have a sacrifice, bishop takes h3, because after g takes, we have queen g3 check again, takes, and we bring the rook to the action, rook e8, queen d2, and rook e5. And, well, we are threatening already queen g3 and rook h5, checkmate. So queen e5, coming forward, queen wants to go and defend, sorry, not on g3, because on g3 it would be taken, but on h2. So if bishop takes, king takes, now bishop d6, looks super promising with bishop with queen h2 coming. But here, in case of queen g5, queen h2, king f3, h6, moving the queen back, and after rook e8, bishop f4, trade happens. We have queen h5, king g2, and rook e5 is coming with ideas of rook g4 checkmate. Okay, not really checkmate, but winning a lot of material. So in case of queen f5, that would be a better approach than queen g5. So queen f5, queen h2, king goes to f3, now bringing the rook. Now in case of knight c3 is a good move for a draw, because after rook e5, queen f4, we are having very funny repetition, repetition of the position. So yeah, pretty funny and a draw. And in case of bishop h5, we have queen h5, and we're having such repetition again, and it's a draw. Very interesting lines. Of course, for that, white have to play all the moves correctly, and they might blunder at some moment. So that was the e takes d5 move. Now let's look at the g3, which might feel like an intermediate move, which attacking our queen on h4. We go away with the queen to h5 and offering a trade to a queen. If g4 in this case is played, as we already played d5, we can introduce the bishop takes on g4 due to the pin on the rook on h1. So queen h5 has to be played, knight takes h5, and now we managed to avoid this idea of pushing the g pawn to all the way to a g5. So if e5 is played with the idea of trapping the knight on h5, because knight doesn't have a square on f6 any longer, I would like you to ask, what do we play here as black? So stop the video and try to find the best move. So yeah, the problem is, again, our knight is kind of trapped, and playing something like g6 doesn't really bring so much sense. So we have to do something, and we play bishop d4. And our idea is to show that also on g2 there is a problem, or sorry, on b2 there is a problem for white. Since after g4 we have a nice move, knight f4, we are not caring about bishop taking the knight because we have bishop b2, and after king b2, bishop a1, we are winning an exchange, and we can always save the bishop also by playing d4 and bishop c3. So yeah, great positions we have. So knight c3 is another option. Then we go for castle. If knight a4 attacking our bishop on c5, then we have bishop d6, bishop e3, rook e8, putting pressure on the e4. And after knight c3, we have f5, put even more pressure. And the problem is that after pawn takes on f5, there is a d4 fork attacking the bishop, the knight, and there is a pin, so the pawn cannot be taken. So super nice position for black. So if g4, white is trying to protect the h3 pawn in that way to castle, we're going for knight f6, the only way. And after pawn takes, we take with the c pawn. We manage to undouble our pawns. We don't have problems. We're going to bring the rook to e8. The other rook will go to b8. We're going to put the pressure on the pawn on b2. Our bishop is going, to develop on e6 somewhere, or b7 also possible at some moment. But the most important thing, we undoubled our pawns and we have good position. It's around equal. Both sides have chances. So this was h3 move. So now bishop e3, trying to trade our bishop on c5, which is of course super strong piece for the bishop on e3. So we have nothing else to do. We have to trade. And after bishop takes e3, queen e3, then we are going for castle. Now we are ready to bring the rook into the action to the e file. And that's why white has to react properly. So in case of knight c3, which is like a normal developing move, we would play for d6. We cannot yet go for d5, but okay, it's always interesting to check d5, but now it's not working. So d6. If long castle, we have knight g4 and double attack, so it's losing. If castle short, then we have knight g4 attacking the pawn on h2. So here if queen f4 looks like defending the pawn, we have a g5 intermezzo. In case of f5 move, then a3, then g5, h4, we're sacrificing another piece. It's an interesting position, but it's a little bit too much, too sharp, and well, we're down a piece, but we're attacking. So that's why here g5 is a move, but after queen g3, queen takes hg, king g7, the position is getting a bit more equalish and coming into the drawish lines here. So if queen to g3 instantly, then we take, and we have similar position. We play h5 here to stop the ideas of f3 and g4, so that pawns cannot expand on the king side. Around equal endgame as well. So h3 immediately in this position, then we have rook e8, bringing it and trying to x-ray all the pieces on the e file. Long castle. Now knight is jumping to d5. We are using the fact that the rook is pinning the queen. Sorry, the bishop, the pawn. And if knight takes, then we take with the pawn, putting pressure on the e4 square. g3, queen f6, and well, we are ready to take on e4 in the next move. And we're going to have definitely a stronger position due to our pieces, since we're ready to play rook b8, targeting the b2 square and attacking the king on the queen side. So queen goes back to d2, then we take with a knight, queen c3, and we take opponent's f2. Queen f6, so now we undoubled our pawns. We are pretty lucky. And after bishop e6, we're getting into position where we have a counterplay. Since there is a weakness on e4, there are some ideas on the queen side as well. Bring in the rook to the b file, potentially putting pressure on the b2 pawn, and so on and so forth. So around equal position, but we have a huge counterattack. So in case of the castle here, then we go for knight g4, and now we in this position, instead of knight g4, by the way, we could went for the d5 or rook e8, but the knight g4 is bringing the game into the end game, where we have more chances for the win if we want to. So queen f4, defending the pawn the only way. Now d6, and now the idea, we want to push for the g5. So if h3 is played, we go for g5, queen f3, and now knight e5, attacking the queen and the bishop at the same time. Queen f6, queen h5, moving away. Now f4. So if queen would be on h4, then f4 would be very strong. So f4, gf, queen f4, and bishop e6. We are getting into this kind of positions. We can bring the king to the h8, bring the rook to the g file, around equal position, but we have our attack opportunities. In case of f3, then we go immediately for the g5 move, bishop, queen g3. If knight e5 here, it would be interesting because after queen h4, gh, white is kind of doubling the pawns. But after f4, knight d3 takes, and we have f5 break. Very unusual pawn structure. It could even be that g2 could be a weakness later on in the game. But I would rather prefer the queen takes g3 without doubling the pawns, and after knight e5, g4 to play a5, and basically just getting the solid position for both white and black. Yeah, and our knight is on e5, very nice. We can see if we want to play c5 or keep the pawns like this. Our bishop is not particularly bad piece, but okay, we can also always change the bishop if we want to. But other than that, we can develop bishop on e6, try to put put more pressure on the pawn on b2 with a rook, let's say, and well, there is still a lot of play left. If queen goes to g3, also immediately offering the trade, then we are taking, pawn takes, and we're going for h5. Very good move, because after f3 there is no g4 opportunity after our knight goes away. Other than that, e5 is going to be a perfect square for the knight. We can play g6, bring king to g7, just making slow improving move, and we're going to get good position in the endgame as well. So knight d2, this is the main move. The idea is for knight to go to f3 and attack our queen on h4. So we kind of have to do something about it, but we play rook e8, targeting the e4 square. So in case of the long castle, we have knight g4 again, attacking the queen and the pawn on f2. So after queen f4, white is pinning to our queen. So d6 has to be played, and now we have again g5, queen g3, and knight f2, and white is losing due to this fork on the rooks. So if white going for the short castle, we again have knight g4. Also, d5 would be also completely fine, but in the endgame we could try to play for a win after we trade the queen. So knight g4, queen f4. Now d6, again defending the knight. So here, if knight f3, we have queen f6, offering a trade. So queen f6, knight f6. We have ideas of playing knight d6, bringing the knight all the way to e5. We don't really have problems. Again, with pawn structure, maybe there is some weakness because of the double pawn, but actually white could also have some problems on b2. So f3 is another option. Then we again go for g5, queen g3, trade happens, and we go with a knight to e5. We can play for we can make some slow improving moves like h6, king g7, putting the pawn on c5, see where we develop this bishop, e6 or d7, and just slowly improve the position and just have a game and try to play for a win if we want to, or settle for a draw if we want. We can offer, or if our opponent offers to us. So that was most of the line. So now we're going to look at the most critical or most important positions or ideas from this chapter. So let's start with this position. Yes, so we played bishop g4 move, targeting the queen. f3 was replied. And now we're inviting white to take the bishop because of our very nice bishop on c5. We're stopping all the castle. King is staying in the center, so we're castling here, introducing rook e8 idea and allowing white to take our bishop, because after take there is knight d5. And rook e8 is coming. Our bishop is blocking king from castling. So very, very huge position for black, definitely for an attack. There is queen h4, queen d7, bringing the other rook, and so on. So white is definitely on the verge of losing this game. The next position is when white's knight went to f5, which is a bit unusual. So here so the main idea of the knight to jump to e3 and d5, so we have to stop it. So that's why we go immediately with a d5, breaking the center and challenging the knight on f5. So now knight either forced to take on g7, or white is forced to take on d5 and c6. And well, that's very important to remember this break with a pawn on d5. The next position is when white played knight c3 move, defending on e5, and at the same time holding the d5 square, not allowing us to play d5. But actually, d5 happens. d5 can be played because the next move is threatened. Very nice move. Bishop coming to the g4. So after ed, we have bishop g4, and after queen g2, queen h5. Super nice idea. So we sacrifice a pawn, but we create a huge attack, and we're getting very nice position, clearly better for black. The next position, what we have, happens after trade of the bishop on e3. Here we have an interesting idea. So first of all, there could be some f4 move which could be played by white. So here we start an attack. We start to become very aggressive, and we go for g5. The main idea is to play g4, rook g8, open up the g file, and put attack against the king on g1. And also we're stopping all the f4 ideas and everything what white could go for. And well, we're just becoming ambitious here. So the next position is when white went for queen f3 here, trying to defend on f2, also offering an idea of bishop coming to d4. So this is a position where we know that, okay, e5 is coming and bishop f4 can come, so we should stop both of them, and that's why we play bishop d4, super important move, pinning the bishop to the b2 pawn, meanwhile stopping the e5 ideas. So great move, which we have to remember. So the other position happens after h3 move immediately. So basically the main point of this move is that white wants to go for g3 so that there is no queen h3, which would be very annoying, which we saw in many lines. It was very annoying. But now it's actually creating a potential threat on h3. So here we go. Even though our king is in the center and we are allowing the check with the tempo, we are playing for d5. Because after pawn takes, we have a very nice king d8 move with introducing the rook e8 idea. And We are just continuing attack here. We're just on the roll. So this is very important idea to remember that d5 exists even in such positions where our king is on the e file. So that was it for today. That was it for Scotch Gambit, the fifth move, knight takes c6. I hope you learned something new today and had a good time. And I'm going to see you, looking forward to see you in the next chapter.